Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you will never miss an episode. Android users can find us and subscribe on your Play Music app. Apple users can find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Stitcher. You can follow us on Spreaker. And you can find the podcasts on jimmyhinton.org or findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so that we can spread the word. Let's get into the show. Well, welcome back to this episode. I'm here sitting with my mother. Hello, Mother.
Hello, Jimmy.
Good to be here with our audience. And today, we're going to do a positive message. We were just talking and saying, a lot of the stuff that we do is really heavy. And we just want to share hope with you guys and catch you up on current events for those of you who are not aware. And Pennsylvania is one of the states where there is sweeping change that's coming rapidly in our state. And I think it's good for survivors. It's bad for abusers. And there are a lot of knees that are shaking right now. So we want to share some of those things with you. And I want to preface this by saying I get probably at least a couple times a day messages from people where they're just kind of venting about the church. And I'm one of the biggest critics of the church, and I think I've earned that right a little bit. I don't want that to sound arrogant, but being a church leader myself, I'm not on the outside looking in, criticizing people within the church. I'm a church leader myself, and so I think it's fair to we should be criticized. I think that's fair. So anyway, I get a lot of messages from people, and they're basically asking, is every church just full of abusers? And are all churches protective of abusers? Is there any hope for the church? Can we ever trust again? Can we ever find a church where we're not going to run into either abusers or people who protect abusers? And so I just want to share my input, my insight, and kind of let you know where I think the church is headed. And, Mom and I were just talking right before we started recording it, and I think we're right in the middle of a tidal wave that's hitting this nation. And not just nation, I think globally. I think the ripple effects
I agree, Jimmy.
never
I think
ending.
it's worldwide. And I think our listeners would agree this tidal wave is a good one.
Yeah.
It's one that's going to bring about so much positive, good energy and change that it deserves our valid attention right now.
Yeah. So there's an event that started the ripple effect that's happening in Pennsylvania. And this was, I don't remember if this one was in 2016. I think it was. But up in Cambria County, which is the county just north of us. We're down in Somerset County, and we're actually right on the county border. So just north of us in Cambria County, there's an investigation that was opened up into the Catholic Church, and it was the diocese of Altoona and Johnstown. So what this investigation uncovered was that for decades there were these Catholic priests and other staff members who were abusing just tons of kids. And the Catholic Church knew about it, and they were shuffling these priests from parish to parish, and they would hide the reasons why. So it was basically a miniature Spotlight. I don't know. Did you ever see the movie Spotlight?
Well, yeah.
It was a really good movie.
Yeah. And Jimmy, for the sake of our listeners, you and I are living in this area. So this is all daily news, has been for us. We've seen our newspapers filled with headlines and about this invasion, so to speak, into the Catholic Church, this investigation. We've read about almost at least 3-4 times a week for a long time. For our listeners, what would they? How would they find this information to validate what we're saying?
You could do a simple Google search, Catholic Church in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
You'll find all kinds of, this is hot news right now, and it should be. So there's sweeping change that's coming in the Catholic Church, and a lot of that's originating in Pennsylvania. And so it really started with one person. I would argue that this started with one person, and that was our district attorney in Cambria County. So she opened up this investigation into the Catholic Church, and which was hard for her to do. And she certainly got a lot of criticism. Is still getting criticism from that. But what this investigation uncovered is that a lot of these churches in the Altoona and Johnstown diocese had secret vaults, and they kept this information hidden, and it was well documented, and so it just uncovered tons and tons and tons of these abusers who are pedophile abusers who are abusing all these little kids. And so what that prompted was for people all across the state of Pennsylvania, survivors of abuse, to start calling and saying, hey, I was abused, but it was outside of the Altoona Johnstown diocese. And so Pennsylvania received so many of those phone calls that the Attorney General's office opened up a grand jury investigation. So the 40th state grand jury in Pennsylvania launched a statewide investigation into the Catholic Church. That final report is going to be released this month. That'll be made open to the public. It's an 884-page document. And north of Pittsburgh, in the Eerie diocese, they have 57 priests and staff who are guilty. And I forget how it was worded. Do you remember how that was worded? I don't
remember the exact wording, but it said that they were credibly responsible for this abuse.
For child abuse, for child sexual abuse. So 57 just in the Diocese of Eerie. 2 of those have already been arrested as a result of this investigation. This is a huge, huge deal.
I think as we stop, we pause, and our minds try to soak up how big this really is. It's both frightening and encouraging. Frightening to think that this has gone on for years and years.
For decades.
Yes, and was covered up. Mm-hmm. There were responsible, trustworthy, our spiritual leaders covered up this information, knew about it, covered it up. The damage that has been done is irrevocable.
Yeah.
In a sense. But encouraging to think, finally, light will be shed on this. People will be punished. Abused victims will no longer feel victimized, but will be given a voice. They are being given a voice, and they will be filled with courage for once, and will be heard and listened to.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the biggest encouragement of all.
Well, and I want to say too, like it's not as simple as they just reported abuse. The Attorney General's office picked it up, and they opened up this grand jury investigation, and now, voila, we have sweeping change in Pennsylvania. Make no mistake that the Catholic Church has fought hard. They have poured a lot of money into this. They've hired lobbyists. This is a big animal that Pennsylvania was up against, and all these survivors were up against, and they were fighting an uphill battle from the very beginning. What's encouraging to me is that there's a guy also from Cambria County. He was one of the nameless victims in the Altoona Johnstown Diocese report. So he's come forward now. In fact, he's leading this charge in the state of Pennsylvania, and that's Sean Daugherty.
Okay.
So Sean Daugherty is just this incredible guy. And man, is he a fighter. And he's a military vet. The guy has a lot of fight in him. And so he spends a lot of time going to Harrisburg, and he spends time in our Attorney General Josh Shapiro's office. And, he said that Josh Shapiro is definitely a friend of survivors. So he keeps sending these messages on his Facebook page, and he says, listen, social media is a powerful tool. He said people don't realize the power that we can harness with social media to make change, where just the other day the Pope made a statement as a result of the stuff that's happening here in Pennsylvania. The Pope was basically, I think he was forced to do it, but he made a statement on child sexual abuse and basically said something to the effect of, we're really going to look into this across all the Catholic churches worldwide. This is certainly an issue that needs to be addressed. And so for the first time, he's publicly had to go to the podium and make a statement on this. That's huge.
That's bigger than big. That is bigger than big. And it began, like you said, with one brave person who was willing to withstand negativity, criticism, and, stand alone. And from there, it has swept across our area. And now, look at it. And it is worldwide. The Catholic Church has been the biggest icon for religion that we've had. And now that is under the scrutiny of this investigation, will be. And that's enormous.
Yeah.
What a victory for victims of abuse.
It is.
What a victory.
So I was interviewed yesterday by Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and when that article comes out, I'll post links to it. But they were asking me the question. They said, in light of the Pennsylvania grand jury investigation into the Catholic Church, do you think it would be worthwhile for the PA grand jury to open up, to widen their scope and to investigate Protestant and non-denominational churches as well? And to which my answer was, I didn't even hesitate. I said, absolutely.
Of course.
Because I see
of course.
very often churches that cover this up, whether it's intentional or not, whether it's by intentional, of course it's intentional, but whether they intentionally mean to cover it up, or whether they think that they're serving the best interests of their church, and they're being people of grace and forgiveness and mercy and all that mushy garbage. Don't get me wrong. I believe in grace and mercy and forgiveness, but when you offer that to the abuser and place on the altar their victims, that's wrong. You don't offer cheap grace to the offenders and give them a free pass while their survivors are suffering in a pile.
I think a lot of this hidden truth has come about as a result of what we discussed in weeks earlier on this podcast. Who wants to stir the pot and who wants to open the lid? Nobody. But now the beauty of this tidal wave, so to speak, is churches don't have a choice.
That's right.
There's no choice now.
And that's exactly what I said in that interview yesterday. I said, the beauty in a grand jury, in a Pennsylvania grand jury investigation is they can subpoena records.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what they did in the case of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, who was, these records were under lock and key.
Sealed and forever.
The Pennsylvania grand jury had the authority to come in and say, no, we're just going to subpoena those records, which they did. And now look, just in Eerie alone, in the Eerie diocese, they found 57 priests and staff who credibly abused multiple victims. Now, I shudder to think of how many victims those 57 had. If you imagine the average number of victims for a pedophile by the time they get caught is 150, multiply that across 57 abusers. Well, I don't have my calculator out, and I'm not good at math. So let's just do some quick math here. 150 and 57, that's 8,550 victims.
And
that's just an average,
right,
just from the Eerie diocese alone.
You're right. And
there are 6 of them under who were part of this investigation, 6 different dioceses.
This is bigger than any of us ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened to victims over the years is more horrid than any of us have ever imagined. What is happening now is the most encouraging thing I've ever experienced in my life, ever. To see that finally victims will be heard, they will have a voice, and there will be change in a positive direction. I'm just incredibly happy. I feel incredibly humbled and blessed to be even a minute part of this change. I
think the other thing that's happened too, and I think this is really important, is because people like Sean Daugherty and you have other survivors who are spending a lot of time with Josh Shapiro himself, our Attorney General, he now has faces to look at, and he's looking into the eyes of people who are victims. He knows the hurt and the pain and the frustration. And he sees the Catholic Church is hiring lobbyists and all this political leveraging that's going on. Our Attorney General's office sees that. And so one of the messages that Sean put out the other day is, he said, look, I know this has been a frustrating journey for survivors, and you feel like we've been fighting and fighting and fighting, and we're exhausted. And just, when you think you don't have any more steam left in you, we get another blow and we get another setback. But he said, I want to make a couple things clear. He said, one is that we have a friend in our Attorney General's office. He said, he is a true blue. He genuinely cares about survivors of abuse. And he said, and number 2, sweeping law reform is coming, and that's a guarantee.
Is hope.
Yeah,
that is hope for all.
And I've been frustrated for a while, and I think even on some of these podcasts, I've expressed some of that frustration. That in the wake of the Jerry Sandusky trial here in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania passed all kinds of sweeping reform laws, and I think a lot of those are good. Increased penalties for mandated reporters who fail to report. You can now go to jail. You probably could before, but I think they've taken it a lot more seriously. They've increased the penalties for mandated reporters who fail to report.
I think there's such an awareness now that there wasn't before, that the law was just a sitting law. It wasn't an active law. Now we have active laws on the books.
But, some of my frustration has been, I think we've not done nearly enough, and a lot of the stuff that we've done has just been misinformed. And so, I get a little bit frustrated with calling prevention when it's not prevention. So what I mean by that is, in Pennsylvania, we're real big on if you see something, you report it as if that's your only option. And that's a little bit frustrating to me, because reporting is the last step. There's so much that we need to be doing to get in front of this and to actually prevent it. And I just haven't heard those answers from Pennsylvania yet, though I think it's coming. So that's where I get encouraged.
We're getting there. And part of the frustration, too, is we want immediate results.
Yeah.
And we haven't had the knowledge to get those immediate results yet.
And, too, the Jerry Sandusky, his sentencing was in 2012, because it was actually, if you remember, his trial was the same week of Dad's sentencing.
I remember clearly.
That was June of 2012. Because I still remember this. It was 4 days before Father's Day.
Right.
Whenever he was sentenced.
Right.
And that was the same week of the Jerry Sandusky trial.
Well, I remember all of that explicitly because I was so thankful that our newspapers picked up Sandusky as
that was
headlines.
that was front page.
Rather than your dad. So in a sense, Sandusky overpowered the news of that, overpowered the local news of your dad. So I will not forget that.
Yeah.
That was a blessing to us in a sense.
But, where do I see the church going? First of all, I think that child sexual abusers who abused kids even decades ago, I think right now, if they're not shaking in their boots, they should be. I think some are. I think a lot are not.
Believe me, Jimmy, I think a lot more are than what we think, because we are seeing how much of a result comes from just one person speaking out. Once one victim speaks up, there are going to be two. Once there are two, there are four, and it multiplies and multiplies. And these abusers have felt totally secure for too many years. They've just,
and they're banking on the silence of their victims. And so I think the irony is that the number one person who the abuser has to fear is the victim who they've created, who they think they've intimidated them into silence. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to see survivors come forward. And so this is my message to the survivors who are listening. Even if you're outside of the statute of limitations, even if you think that people won't believe you, which some won't. I mean, that's just a reality that you're going to have to face.
Right.
There are going to be people out there who criticize you and say, well, the stupid things like, well, if this happened 20 years ago, why would you come out now and talk about it? Why wasn't it that important back then? That, and all the dumb things that people say. And you're going to have those people. Here's my plea to you. Start linking arms with other survivors and start telling people your story, because I'm telling you, I think, and Sean Daugherty and myself have not met in person. We've talked online a little bit. We will connect. We will connect. But my gut is that when Sean first started coming forward, and he publicly identified himself as one of the victims in the Altoona-Johnstown diocese in that report, I don't think that Sean was like, man, this is just a breeze, and this is going beautifully, and people are actually listening. And I don't think that was the case at all. I think and I see Sean, like poor Sean, he gets a lot of criticism, and that guy's got broad shoulders, and I think he's doing a beautiful job leading other survivors. He's given so much encouragement to people. He continues to be a source of encouragement, and he's just cheering other survivors on. And he's saying, look, yes, we're up against a really powerful force, but stay encouraged. Know that when this report comes out, and it will come out at the end of this month, that's going to be public record. Every single person is going to have access to that record.
That is so powerful. I'm just sitting here in
These people
awe.
are going to be named by name in that public report.
In absolute
That's
awe.
a win.
That's a win.
The fact that two in Eerie have already been arrested, that's a win.
Just think, Jimmy, a few years back when your dad was going to trial, there was such a fear that even with known victims, with all the information law enforcement had, there was such a fear that a loophole would be found and he would wiggle out of it. Now we're closing those loopholes with the law, and we're empowering victims, and change is happening because of this. And it's so different just within 5, 6, 7 years than, so much different.
Well, I think about this too. Lawmakers have, to their defense a little bit, they've never collectively had a group of survivors like they have now. Right. Currently, in 2018, they've never collectively had a voice of survivors sharing their stories and giving them that insight and saying, look, here's how we need to reform these laws. Here's what we need to do to make laws that work, that make sense, that are effective. They've never had that before. And I look at, another individual, Rachael Den Hollander. She's leading a group of survivors. She's flying back and forth between Kentucky and Michigan, and she is working very hard to reform the laws in the state of Michigan. I was
going to say, is it easy? No.
Not at all.
No change is easy. Nothing comes easy with this kind of change, but we're seeing results because of people being so determined and so forthright and saying it's time. It's time we stand together. I love the example you said of victims of abuse linking arms with others. There's such strength in that.
Yeah.
So much strength in that.
Well, and there are two that we know of, and I can name individuals that I look at this and I'm like, man, the power in just one person making a decision and picking up the phone and calling somebody else. But the two of them are Ashley Easter and Mary DeMuth. So they are leading a charge to go down to they're doing a rally outside of the Southern Baptist Convention that's going to be Tuesday of next week. So, the whole thing with Paige Patterson, and he was just fired without benefits.
Reading up about that.
Yeah, from Southwestern Theological Seminary. He was removed, fired without benefits. So Mary and Ashley and my mind's not working right now. I need another shot of coffee. Anyway, they're going to lead this rally that's specifically for survivors of abuse. They're holding that rally outside of this convention, which is massive. This is absolutely, they're going to speak into the hearts not only of potentially thousands of survivors who are going to be there on the ground, but it's going to be publicized. This is going to be national news. This is going to make waves. And it just happened by these ladies picking up the phone and saying, hey, what do you think about having this rally down there? I love that. There's so much power in that. And
do you know what I love even more is some occasions like this are taking the shame away from being a victim. Victims have always, when you talk with them, they'll say, I feel so ashamed, or they were saying that. When rallies like this happen or gatherings happen for survivors of abuse, shame is stripped away. And instead you see faces of empowerment. And I love that so much. It's time. It's way beyond time for this.
Well, I think the big hovering question is, so what? Where does that leave us with the state of the church? Because that's obviously something that's very close to my heart. Because I see a lot of the ugliness that's going on behind the veil inside of the churches, and it is ugly, and it continues to be ugly. So where does that leave the church? Where does that leave people who are seeking, people who are looking for a church they can trust again? Here's what I think is going to happen. This is just my opinion, but I think this is the direction that we're moving in. I think we're going to see lots of survivors leading churches. By leading churches, I mean going to seminaries. I mean taking an interest in ministering to people, actively ministering to people in that role as a minister, as somebody who's leading a church. I'm already seeing that happen, where I'm seeing survivors who are advocates. They're starting their career in seminary. And I love that. I think we're going to see more and more of that. Too. And we're going to push out these arrogant church leaders, the ones that think they have it all put together. They think they have all the answers. We're going to see them driven out of the church, not by force, but by passion They're going to be driven out by passion. And it's people who have the heart of Jesus close to their heart, and they're just going out there and they're doing ministry. And this isn't
saying that our current church leaders have no heart for Jesus.
No, not at all. There are a lot of good ones.
Don't want our audience to think that that's what you're saying. But God is cleaning house. Mm-hmm. He's using this to clean house, I truly believe. And when the house is cleaned, we're going to see a new layout of everything. It's going to be beautiful when you have people whose hearts have been broken mm-hmm. and now are restored, and they're our leaders. I long for that day, and it's coming. Yeah. It's coming.
Yeah.
It truly is. So, all those questions, who can we believe? Who can we trust? Will the church stand? The church is here forever. I have no doubt about that. It's a promise. If we believe in the Word of God, we know there's nothing that is going to tear the church away from us. Here forever. I do believe it's being cleaned out. I do mm-hmm. believe it's being strengthened. I think the church's comeback is going to be stronger than ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll circle back to that question, and then we'll close here. That question, when survivors are asking that question, who do we trust? There's a little bit of underlying irony in that question, because the survivors who are asking that question, ironically, are the trustworthy ones. And so they're asking that question, who's trustworthy? Who can we trust? They need to look at themselves, and they need to believe in themselves, and they need to say, I am trustworthy. And if survivors are at a place where they feel that they can lead and they can minister and they can help other people, don't stand there and wait for somebody who's trustworthy. Know that you're trustworthy yourself, and help other people. Yes. And I just see a heart that's beautiful with survivors. The way that they nurture each other, the way that they care for each other, help each other, encourage each other. I think it's incredible. I think there is a tremendous positive change that's coming to the church. And I don't think it's coming. I think it's already here.
It's here.
I think it's just going to continue to expand and grow.
Amen and amen to that.
So yeah, I'll leave you with our little nugget here at the end.
Our truth bomb is?
Yeah, our truth bomb is help is on the way. Lots of people are banding together, whether they're survivors or just victim advocates who have a heart for helping survivors of abuse. Help is on the way. So be encouraged by that, and I just look forward to see where the church is going.
Absolutely, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker, subscribe on Google Play Music, Apple Podcasts, or Stitcher. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.